Actually, I wrote that before Rocky, and I had sold it because I was very poor. I had sold the screenplay for $100. True story, about $100, $110. And the opportunity came when I went on an audition, and I didn't get the part, but I said I write a little bit. They said, do you happen to have anything? I said, I had the screenplay called Paradise Alley. I brought it to the producers. They go, oh, we like this. We buy this script for $20,000. And I said, well, I don't exactly own it. I sold it for $100. So I went and I brought those men who bought it for $100, and they hated each other. So now they said, we would make it, but we hate them. That's when I went, well, here's the opportunity. The door is open. And that's when I went home and started to write Rocky. Because I said, the door is open, but I don't have anything. See? I said, let me think. All right, let me just write about everyday people who want an opportunity but can't get one, and I'll just put them in the body of a boxer. And that's how it all happened.
One of the strong points about that film is the way you evoke a time and a place so well, and it's the same with Rocky, Philadelphia, and so on. How much time as a screenwriter do you devote to researching, in that way, to get that real, authentic atmosphere?
A lot. I think that when you write, you try to visualize the atmosphere as a character that's almost as important as your lead. Because I've seen so many films where you have an interesting premise, but the ambience, the surrounding is boring. And so I like there with haze and red colors and just all these different diversions. So I spend a great deal of time researching it. But usually when you get there, it changes, either the weather or your philosophy. You know what? Maybe I should minimalize. Maybe I should be tighter. We have these grand visions. Oh, I want to do some incredible visual shot, and I say, am I doing this for myself? Is this really important to the story? Or should I just try to keep the character and the energy of the story going and not try to show off your abilities? It's kind of an ongoing battle. Like in the last film with Rambo, it was a choice to, here I had incredible vistas in Thailand and Cambodia. I'm at Cambodia and on the border of Burma. Then I said, but this is not a story. It's a story about this, story about this, So you have to constantly changing.
And also you're on screen there, and I'm thinking in Rocky and in Rambo, you're on screen a lot of the time. And when you direct yourself, are those scenes harder to do than the ones where you're not, and you're able to stand behind the camera and really check?
Contrary to what people say, I think it's easy to direct yourself. I mean, you certainly should know yourself by now. I know pretty much what I can do and I can't do. So I learn every line in the screenplay, everyone's line. Because usually you write it, so I know the screenplay as well as I know my hand. That way I can focus on everything else. So if I'm doing a scene, I'm really looking at the character over there, I'm watching the light, I'm over here, is this man messing up his lines? Right. So it's kind of comfortable, because it's like you're just on automatic pilot. Yeah.
You particularly like montage scenes in Staying Alive when Tony sees Finola Hughes for the first time and she's dancing, and you merge them. And in Rocky Balboa, there's a similar sequence. And do you write such montage sequences at the screenplay stage, or do you only introduce those when you're directing?
That's interesting. Usually on a fight scene, I'll write montage, because fight scenes can be incredibly redundant. So you try to take the highlights, or with the montage you can also be a bit more emotional than just literally doing fight scenes. Like there's a huge montage in this. And same with, I feel that montage are much more sensual. So, but quite often you're in a film and you go, God, I have all this footage. Why don't I just make a montage? Because the movie will be 3 hours long. So I can take an hour of footage and put it into 3 minutes of montage, and you get the feeling. Also, it's really what separates a great deal of difference between literature and painting. Cinema has the ability to do montage, which not many art forms do.
Yes.
Almost none, really.
And it's very moving at the end of, or in Rocky Balboa, where you're able to integrate footage from the earlier ones with Talia Shire and so on. That becomes very, very moving.
Yeah, montage is incredible. I mean, some people think of it as, not as important or as cinematic or as serious. But it's always worked for me. I enjoy it a great deal. Actually, it's a skill in itself. I may have to just use a particular editor.
Yeah.
That's all he does. He has that gift.
Right.
He can't even cut a normal scene. He's terrible.
Right.
But he can do brilliant montage. Funny.
And I'm thinking of the flair in which something like the Las Vegas fight sequence, which you said in a recent interview, I think you said you had only 3 days to film it.
Yeah, we had. That was
and how do you marshal all of those crowds? How do you do that? Do you build a team of assistants? Clearly, with a major studio picture, you have assistants and so on. But how much direct control do you have over those very big scenes?
Actually, once the film starts, you don't have a lot. You have to depend upon your team. I go out there and I make a speech to everyone and say, okay, we're now doing Rocky, we're going to do this. I know it's going to be a little slow, sometimes it's going to be fast, but just please listen to these people. Right. And especially this group here, because I'm really going to focus on you, and I want to focus. So right away they feel they think they're going to be in the movie more, so they stay put.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm going to focus on you to go, oh, really? So right away they all feel important. But once it starts, especially in that last film, which became very physical, you must rely upon your crew, and then you hope, because we're having 9 cameras, 8 cameras, that the cameramen will be somewhat creative, but sometimes they don't. They're terrible. They start to focus on one person, and they miss the entire. That's the trouble when you're working with multiple cameras, to get everyone trying to get your vision, and it doesn't usually work.
Nearly all of the films that you've created personally, you feel the central figure is in a way an outsider. He's at the center of things, very often applauded for what he's done, but deep down he's alone, and he has difficulty in relating to people. I mean, that's a theme, I think.
And it's when I've held true to that, it's been what I consider successful. When I've avoided that relationship, let me make it simple, when the character becomes stronger than the audience, you lose your audience. The character has to have as many problems as the people in the audience. Then they can relate. Like, here's a guy who's tough, world champion, but he's scared. He's still nervous. And everyone, I don't care who you are, when you sit in front of this, you get nervous. When you go, you're nervous. And it's that connection. So it's very, very, very important to use the, let's say, 10 or 15 identifiable things that we all have in common: jealousy, fear, ego, lack of ego, insecurity, over security, all these things that we tend to, pride, this, that, and false pride. That kind of thing is what makes the character absolutely relate to the audience. And when I don't do it, it's a disaster. And I have done a few disasters like that, because, okay, let me make a super person. And so now you're just sitting back there unemotionally involved. And when you lose the emotions of a movie, wow. But also, putting emotions in a movie is a very, very delicate situation. A lot of people find it embarrassing, because if you're too emotional, too romantic, you're considered corny, silly, not serious. So it's a very delicate line. We all want to be touched emotionally, but no serious filmmaker wants to be called sentimental.
Right.
But don't be afraid of sentiment, because we all have it. When you have, you go home, when your dog sits on your lap, you go, oh, we're all suckers, all right? We're all very sentimental, really. It's there. You can't hide it. Writing, I almost approach it like exercise. I get up maybe at 4:30 in the morning. It takes an hour to get going, and then I'll start to write about maybe 3 hours. And then it becomes repetitive. And the next day I get up, and even if I don't feel inspired, I'll sit there for those 3 hours until the brain says, okay, you must start to produce something. So I try to write quickly, and I follow a pattern, just the way you would be if you were in the Army or whatever. And then that gets me through it quickly. Some writers will take a year, 2 years. Everyone has a different process, but that's what I do. I literally
write better in the morning, like
much
most
better.
great writers.
I used to write at night all the time but I found that everyone died. It was dark. It was creepy. It was really horrible. It was like very depressing. Then I realized Edgar Allan Poe used to write at night. Now I figure out why. Yes, without the success of Rocky Balboa, there would have been no Rambo. The hardest thing, of course, they said, well, you're too old to play a boxer. And I said, I agree. But this is not a boxing movie. It's about a philosophy of getting older and how do you deal with, as we get older, people think life gets easier. It doesn't. It gets more complicated because the things that you love start to go away and die and friendship. So it becomes very, very emotional as you get older. And so they didn't want to make the movie. I mean, literally, studio says, we will never, ever make this movie over our dead body. And my career wasn't doing very well, so I was finished. And it wasn't until I was at a restaurant in Mexico, and a man named Joe Roth, who ran Revolution Films, said, can I read the screenplay? He read it, and he goes, the producer doesn't like you very much. I said, I don't know why, but he says, his wife doesn't like you. I said, okay. So it's all these stupid things that keep moving. I said, well, I don't know why. I mean, she doesn't like me, but he goes, I like you, and I'm going to finance the movie. So he gave us $20 million to do the movie, but without him, it never happened. And so yes, and to me, it's my greatest feeling, greatest victory, much more than the first one.
By seeing the clips yesterday and today, I'm asking myself, your Italian background, has it any influence in your work? I say the great films of the 50s, which influenced from Italia, which influenced a lot of Scorsese. Did they influence you as well? Neorealism. Was there something in your work?
Not really. I mean, I think because I'm only half Italian, but I think at that time the ethnic change was happening in Hollywood. We were going away from very, very, I would say, washed, blonde, blue-eyed actors, and you're going to Pacino and De Niro and things. Exactly, and the whole Godfather thing was happening. So I got caught up in that because before that it was very, very difficult. If you were Italian, or Italian looking, you usually played like I did in Capone with Ben Gazzara. You're always the hitman, the mug. I was always the mugger. I mugged everybody. Jack Lemmon, Woody Allen, everybody.
Hi. My question, I have two questions. Someone asked you about your writing process. That you write for 3 hours in the morning. Do you write a screenplay from beginning to end, or do you have some kind of structure that you write?
No, I write it from beginning to end. And what I'll try to do is I write longhand. So on a legal pad, I'll go, goes to here, sees his mother, goes to the store. So I'll have like 10 things. Of beats where he's going, gets on a horse, goes swimming, boom, boom, boom. And I do that. And I know in my heart, 80% of it will be no good. But you're getting through the screenplay. You're getting it done. Because a rewrite is always more fun and much more enjoyable. I don't believe people should look for perfection or even 50% perfection in the first draft. It's always going to be kind of this, like a child scribbling, but you did it. And the main thing for me is once you have that accomplishment, let's say you could do it in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Again, maybe 10% will be good, but you've now have this sense of accomplishment, you did it, and the rewriting process starts, and that's when the fun begins. So that's what I do. I literally will go out, find, 10 beats. Next day, it gets a little easier. Okay, next 5 scenes, fine. And before you know it. But then again, there's also, this happens. You can get 3/4 of the way through and you realize this screenplay doesn't work. It's one of those 3/4 screenplays. It's 75% there and the rest. said, damn. That's happened a few times too. You think your story's going to make it, and it's more of a half hour. Now that it's 25 years since I walked out of that trailer the first time on those cold streets in Philadelphia, and I knew this was like the moment of truth. And they said, Sylvester, you ready? I said, no, but Rocky is. Almost seems like a dream state. And quite often people will say, God, that must have been incredible. I said, yeah, but I was never there. And now when I sit back and I reflect on it, what an incredible miracle. Every day I truly miss that character so much. I tell you, sometimes I could just cry because I'll never have a voice like that again where I can just speak whatever I feel in my heart. That's the one thing I'll always cherish about that character, because if I say it, you won't believe it, but when Rocky said it, it was the truth. I used to sit in this little apartment, and it was a room. As a matter of fact, the room was so small, I remember I was able to open up the window and close the door while sitting on the bed at the same time. It was like 8 feet by 8 feet by 9 feet. But the one thing about that room, there was really very little distraction. So I would sit there propped up in bed, and I'd go out with my big pen and legal pad and just start writing these stories. And most of them were very, very trivial, but there was something about the process of unrealized dreams. I was always brought back to this subject because I think it's one of the most enduring subjects and one of the most difficult passages for people to accept, that they never were realized in their own lifetime, that they just didn't get that shot.
You know, I've been coming in for 6 years. The 6 years you've been sticking it to me. I want to know how come.
You don't want to know.
Yeah, I want to know how come.
You want to know?
I want to know how.
Okay, I'm going to tell you. Because you had the talent to become a good fighter. And instead of that, you became a leg breaker. Some cheap, second-rate loan shark.
It's a living?
It's a waste of life.
The more I thought about this kind of street-like character that just is totally misrepresented by the way he looks physically. Just the way he walks down the street was enough to say people, oh, dismiss him. He's kind of looks like a bully or looks like a dark kind of character. And I thought, you know, that's an interesting character because they're always unrealized. Well, that festered in my mind for quite a while, and then eventually, after Lords of Flatbush, I decided it was a time to come to California. So I went to California, and I moved in the Valley, and things weren't going very, very well there. As a matter of fact, I had to go out and try to sell my dog because it was either do that or he just was not going to be very well fed around the house. And then one night, I went to see Muhammad Ali fight Chuck Wepner.
We want to be free. We got to be free. Everybody said free.
Wepner not concerned with the left jab at all. He just takes the...
And what I saw was pretty extraordinary. I saw a man they called the Bayonne Bleeder who didn't have a chance at all against, the greatest fighting machine, supposedly, that ever lived.
Body back and slips a punch to his left. Oh! A vicious shot to the rib of Muhammad Ali, and what a surprise! Chuck Wepner gets to the body.
And for one brief moment, this supposed stumblebum turned out to be magnificent in the fact that he lasted and knocked the champion down. I said, boy, if this isn't a metaphor for life. His entire life crystallized at that moment. He will be remembered for all eternity, at least among the fight fans. He did something extraordinary. I said, now that is probably what I need as a catalyst for an idea. A man who's going to stand up to life and take one shot and maybe go the distance. So I started to write. And it was one of those writing frenzies. And 3 days later, I came up with the script of Rocky. Now, the script by no means was a finished piece of material. It was probably about 90 pages, and maybe 10% of it remained in the final script, but it was done. Originally in Rocky, the film was very, very dark because filmed at that time, the anti-hero was I guess, the favored kind of character of the day. And I pretty much wrote the original one to be like that. The character was very dark. As a matter of fact, he throws the fight at the very end, and Mickey himself turns out to be this very angry, racist man. And the reason actually Rocky throws the fight because he didn't want to be involved in this kind of world. He said, you know, I'd rather be who I was and to just have all this hatred around me and so on. I remember showing it to my wife. She goes, "Oh, I don't like it. Rocky seems so nasty, so this, so that." Because I had made him very, very street-like and unrepentant. You know, he didn't have the kind of attitude that eventually he ended up with. So I went back and rewrote and rewrote and rewrote. I first met Bob Chardoff and Irwin Winkler, and I believe I was there on a casting call. So we're talking a little bit, and I guess I really wasn't right for the acting part. And on the way out, I said, "Oh, I don't know if it matters, but I do a little bit of writing." He goes, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, I'm writing this story. I have this thing about wrestlers, and I might do something about boxing." Well, he says, "Well, bring it around." And I thought, if I hadn't stopped on the way out, you know, that's why I tell all actors or writers, don't give up. Keep talking. Eventually, you might hit a nerve somewhere, and they go, come on back. And if they didn't say, come on back, or bring it later and let's see what you've developed, I wouldn't be sitting here. So I have to give incredible credit to their insight and their patience, and they're willing to take a chance, which it doesn't exist much anymore, unfortunately. Originally, when I brought the script to them, they were fairly enthusiastic about it. The one thing they were not enthusiastic about was me playing the part, and I really can't blame them. At the time, Ryan O'Neal was a candidate, Burt Reynolds, Robert Redford, Jimmy Caan, and they all, you know, were at the top of their game. And so I could see it, but there was something inside of me that said, you know, this opportunity is never going to come around. And I really wasn't used to money, and I had no idea of what I would be missing. But the temptation started to come forward. At first it was $25,000, then $100,000. I go, well, I never heard of $100,000 because I had like $106 in the bank, and like I said, I had to sell my dog, and things were not looking very, very good. My $40 car had just blown up, so I was taking a bus to work, but still, it didn't matter. I wanted to stick with it. Then it went up to $150,000, $175,000, and it went up to $250,000. Now my head was starting to spin, and it went up to $330,000, and probably I heard it went up to $360,000, and I thought, all right, you know, you've really managed poverty very well. You've got this down to a science. You really don't need much to live on. I had like sort of figured it out, so I was not in any way used to the good life. So I thought, you know what? If I know in the back of my mind, if I sell this script and it does very, very well, I'm going to jump off a building. And if I'm not in it, there's no doubt about it, I'm going to leap in front of a train. I'm going to be very, very upset. So this is one of those things where you just roll the dice and you fly by the proverbial seat of your pants. Say, all right, I got to try it. I got to just do it. I may be totally wrong, and I'm going to be taking a lot of people down with me, but I just believe in it. We didn't have really the money to shoot a normal union film at that time in Philadelphia, so we would travel in a van. I would jump out of the van, and we were working with the handheld camera at the time with Garrett Brown, and it was somewhat experimental. And he'd film me running through shopping malls and up down and steps and flights, curved corridors along the river, until finally my legs basically gave out, and I'm like writhing on the ground, and I want to rise up and say, John, I'm dying here. And he goes, no, use it. Use the pain. I said, for what? I mean, I'm in misery. He goes, well, no, you know, it's giving your character, it's giving him some depth. I said, it's giving me bruises. It's giving me like agony. I can't sleep at night. But, you know, John would use, one thing about John, he would use the environment. If he saw, like the scene where we just jumped down and saw this ship along the dock, this docked along the pier, and he said, just jump out, run as fast as you can along the ship. And I'm running and running. I said, you know what? My legs are buckling. I'm literally going to crash down here. Teeth are going to go, jaw, face. I'm just going to be ground down to this flat-faced image. Please. And I just barely made it. As John had me, he would have me run and jump park benches and down streets, and people are throwing things at me. Like when I had the orange thrown at me, and these people had no idea who I was. I was just some strange alien invader in a well-worn, tattered, baggy, incredibly ugly sweatsuit running through their neighborhood, you know, and they're like throwing things at me. And we kind of like made it work, but actually it was like I thought they were trying to hit me with the orange. There was a kind of a lot of injuries on the set. I remember I was doing running up and down the steps. Originally, I was supposed to run up and down the steps with butt kiss to show how strong Rocky had become. The first time he could barely get up the steps, and then I started picking up the dog. And halfway up the steps, I said, "This is a bad idea." The dog weighed about 135 pounds. I said, and there's no way I could run gracefully up the steps. More or less, I couldn't even stagger up the steps. So the dog was definitely cut out. But in the meantime, I had gotten a wicked case of shin splints, which is an old injury I had gotten from playing high school football. And then when I was hitting the meat, I thought, this would be an interesting visual, hitting the meat. Well, I don't know if anyone's hit a bull lately. They're hard. They're real hard. So all my knuckles were flattened out. They just became, I guess, kind of like, well, I don't know what they're good for anymore. I guess, you know, kind of like a table leg now. They're pretty flat. They're pretty even. They really don't function as a hand much anymore. But these are all somewhat of the memories of, and the broken finger that I was using with Adrian. I said, okay, I'll just like take all the injuries in the movie and somehow work it in. Also in the movie, there was, we couldn't afford many people, so I tried to get as much help from friends, from my brother who plays a street corner singer, and my father who's a bell ringer. As I said, my dog is in it. Even my wife, my first wife, was the set photographer. But I think she shot a total of maybe 100 pictures because the budget was really, really tight. And actually, it was probably the best set photographer I've had in a long time because all those pictures are great. Talia Shire was also a last-minute choice because we just couldn't find the right person, and then she came in, and it was, I think, the same night as Carl Weathers. I think it was. And she came in, and we just read, and I felt the earth move. I really felt a tremendous vitality and kinship. I mean, I loved her. I really, really loved her. I just loved the way she looked and the way her hair fell and this timid, fragile creature. I said, it was just incredible and the perfect voice. So when we were going to do Rocky meets her and he just talks to her and he sees a beauty in her that no one else sees because everyone has something to do. Rocky really has nothing to do. So he moves at a much slower pace and he observes and he sees things that other people don't see. So he's trying to bring her out because I guess he feels that she's probably the only one who's worse off than he is. So he's feeling kind of like a little protective towards her. And the sequence where we're supposed to go ice skating, originally that was written for 300 extras and it was a big deal. Well, I show up on the set. They said, we have a slight change in plans. We have one extra. I said, interesting. And I said, well, I have an interesting thing to tell you, too. I don't ice skate. I don't know why I wrote it, but I thought it'd be interesting. So here we are with an empty arena, and I don't really skate at all. So I decided I was going to run on ice, and she says she skates, but if you watch her ankles are falling in, and she's barely holding on, and Rocky's trying to explain his life, looking cool, and he looks like so foolish, but she doesn't care. And where they really come together at that moment when he goes, you know, my father said I wasn't born with much of a brain. He goes, my mother, she says sort of the same thing. He says, you weren't born with much of a body, so you better start developing your brain. It's like, whoa, these two people are two halves that absolutely need to fit together. You know, they are really on the same page. Then he walks her home,
I think we make a real sharp couple of coconuts. I'm done with your shot. What do you think?
And I'm starting to like realize that this is the key to the film. This is the heartbeat. The whole movie is going to be based on the discovery of these two people, the love. She goes upstairs, and now she's like terrified because this is not exactly what you call a swinging bachelor apartment. And the moment when he gets her to that door, all of a sudden the whole facade changes. He no longer looks like this terrifying guy. He goes, would you take off your glasses? And she really looks, if you ever watch that scene closely, you'll never see better responding by an actress to an awakening inside of like really feeling like someone truly loves her. That it's like she's dying. She's never felt this before. And coming from this man who is, this physical kind of specimen, the last kind of guy she ever imagined herself being with, it just, I disappear in that scene. She is just off the chart.
You don't want to kiss me back if you don't want. I don't want to kiss you.